But then I fell in love. Mambo ikakuwa complicated. Hinesabu, yes we're in love. Nimeingia mtihani bila kalamu. Yeah, I'm not ready. Pressure mingi me not daddy. Oh, I'm going crazy. Yeah. Juu sasa ninavalishwa kitenge, tukifanana penzi ni ya milele. No one else comes as a kupende. Hizi vitu kwangu ni crazy. Usielewe vile kitenge itafanya penzi iwe milele. No one else comes as a sipende. Hizi vitu kwangu ni crazy. Kama ziko ready, I'm not ready. Imerudi square one. 1 + 1 wacha ibaki 1. Msinifunze mimi nimeshalan. Napambana na hali yangu kama Saddam. Basi tusiwa mind, tusiwape sikio. Little baby will be fine. Tusiwaonyeshe kilio. For those who fall in love, mambo isikuwe complicated kama hesabu. When you're in love, usijipate mtihani bila kalamu. Yeah, if you're not ready, pressure mingi usidedi. Please don't go crazy. Juu sasa ninavalishwa kitenge, tukifanana penzi ni ya milele. You wanna come sasa kupende. Hizi vitu kwangu ni crazy. Tusielewe vile kitenge itafanya penzi iwe milele. Na mbona rasta mzazi sipende. Hizi vitu kwangu ni crazy. Kama ziko ready, nani alinidanganya eti mapenzi huwa simple? Nani alinidanganya penzi hainaga kilio?
So fresh is on the beat.
What I wish, a storytelling. What I wish, baby, tumejiseti we on the highway. Tukafunga breki, tukaanza bishana, asking who is Diana, vipi mnajuana. I swear tumejibetray, baby tumejiseti, cause love isn't here right now. I guess we'll never know. Mali hii story ingeenda. Tulichoanza kuja tumalize, kinachokwaza baby ziandike. Punguza drama, baby zitushike, wacha kishada. I don't wanna argue, kako sawa miko sawa. Kako sawa miko sawa. Akizile vitu tulipanga, ukanishukisha namba. Nachuna misi hiki tanda, vile visa na visanga. Akizile vitu tulifanya, kamlo badilishe namba. Bado wasemanga mini psycho, bado mupiganga simu yako. Nilideletingi namba yako, lakini naikumbukanga kwa moyo. And I just can't explain. Thoughts of you and me keep going up and down in my brain. And you were looking for some love, didn't care for the fame. I was looking for a good time playing the game, yeah. And now you're stuck on my lane. Moving in together, baby, it was never the same. Oh, it's such a shame. Kila saa tulichoanza kuja tumalize, kinachokwaza baby ziandike, punguza drama baby zitushike, wacha kishada. I don't wanna argue, kako sawa miko sawa, kako sawa miko sawa, akizile vitu tulipanga ukanishukisha namba, najuna misi hiki tanda vile visa na visanga, akizile vitu tulifanya kabla ubadilishe namba. I don't wanna argue, kako sawa miko sawa, kako sawa miko sawa, akizile vitu tulipanga ukanishukisha namba, najuna misi hiki tanda vile visa na visanga, akizile vitu tulifanya kabla ubadilishe namba. A storyteller, oh, it's been 1 year down the line, feeling so alive. The baby can't say that is when you left me. Sing me a lullaby, eh, to make me sleep at night. Usingizi sina lately, usingizi sina lately. Sijui kama ni mchezo waliona, sijui kama hii mateso yatanikoma, sijui kama kesho nitaiona. Oh mama, mama kama unibembeleze, kama unitengeneze, I'm still here, I'm still here baby. Mama kama unibembeleze, kama unitengeneze, I'm still here, I'm still here, baby. Oh. Nalewa asubuhi ya kuona, moyoni nimekonda, tumbona hizi kama walishona, chakula kwezi songa, ninavyohisi mabisu nitibu, nimekuwa wazimu, naye mbisi hawezi nijibu, nilichofanya, ninavyohisi mabisu nitibu, nimekuwa wazimu, naye mbega hawezi nijibu, nilichofanya. Mama kama unibembeleze, kama unitengeneze, I'm still here, I'm still here. Mama kama unibembeleze, kama unitengeneze, I'm still here, I'm still here, baby. yako ya kuzaliwa, kula na kunywa na kusaza pa. Leo niiteni mheshimiwa, baba freshi marashi nimejaa.
Hello. Oh, hi everyone. If we could get seated, we're starting in exactly 60 seconds. Thank you so much, everyone. If we could have our seats. We're running a bit late, so if we could have a gentleman in the front row. Starting imminently in 10 seconds. Thanks, everyone.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. So I just got back from a very fun, exciting event, Africa Tech, and they had this thing. It's why I like visiting entrepreneurs and innovators to see if indeed I have your attention. Can I have one clap? Can I have one clap? Two claps? Three claps? Three claps? Thank you. Thank you very much for humoring me. It was so fun. And if you have an opportunity, I suggest that you visit them at the Shamba Cafe. I know it's a little far, but it's good to hear what the innovators are doing in the continent in regards to adaptation and resilience. But today, I would like to welcome you to this event, to this JETCo event. We wanted to really take an opportunity to think about what it means to have a just energy transition collaboration. What does it mean to get just energy transition right in the continent? And just to hear from you on how best you think just energy cooperation should work in order to both enable communities in Africa and ensure that we are gaining momentum in development. So this is our first of a series of dialogues that the Climate Champions team will be hosting and convening throughout the regional forums. And we will be looking at developing a framework for just energy transition collaboration projects. And we're really thrilled that we get started in Africa to pilot this concept. In this dialogue, we want to hear from you, the variety of stakeholders that are here. So we encourage you to really actively participate with us, no matter what you think your understanding is of just energy transition. We talk about a just energy transition, fully aware that there are spaces in the continent that still do not have energy, so they have nothing to transition from or to. But we want to think about what does it also take to ensure that there is a development of energy and access to energy in those communities. What sort of corporations would be needed to lead to closing those disparities? So please note that all your inputs will also feed directly into the COP28 agenda and into the global stocktake process. We have a digital rapporteur who will be joining us and a digital illustrator that will be capturing your insights. So the champions are developing this framework as I have already mentioned, and we are looking forward to how local communities are to engaging on further on how local communities are the first to experience these potential positive and negative impacts of the ongoing transitions. And as such, the framework that we're working on aims to translate both public-private cooperation into real investment, fostering direct, impactful, and fast to implement action by non-state actors in communities. And for doing it right, in order for us to do it right, we will learn from you. We want to make sure that we are capturing your experiences on what has worked so far, what has not worked so far, and most important issue, what we need to do to enhance our capabilities to deliver just transition through collaboration to make real world projects happen. These initiatives can include direct investment from the private sector in communities, de-risking by concessional finance, blended finance, guarantees, as well as off-take agreements. We understand that there's a lot to engage in this particular session, and therefore I'm very pleased that we have a very capable expert panel that will be joining us later in the session. But before the panel comes up, it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage to give us the keynote messages Dr. Mahmoud Muhildin, who is the UN Climate Change High Level Champion COP27 Egypt, and our principal to come and give us the welcome statement. So while he walks up to the stage, Jabri, can I have my card back, please? So I'm sort of known for surprises. Yeah. It's my thing. You have been preferred. Yes, yeah, I'm very consistent with surprises. We yesterday, 2 days ago, we thanked Dr. Mahmoud Muhildin for his support of the work that we've been doing in Africa. Unfortunately, the team wasn't all available. So today, we continue to thank him for championing the Africa work that we're doing, and we will do so at the end of this session. But the team has, in addition, put together something for you to look over at the end of the panel. Sorry? We will continue to do so. All right, thank you. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, all right. So, very kind of you. So, instead of reading my talking points prepared by Bugulu and the rest of the team, I can just read to you those nice notes. Thank you. You are always so kind and full of surprises. I think this is the third time today I'm talking about just energy transition. We started the discussion earlier on the project level. Then we spoke with the Marrakesh partners in issues related to practical consideration for the just energy transition. And then now, which I like really to get 3 levels of engagement on just energy transition, speaking to each other, are coordinating matters with each other, the global, the regional, and the local, which mattered the most. During the COP27, I had the honor of moderating a session that was led by the President of South Africa and the President of the European Council on just energy transition. And in that session, we're reflecting on the preparations for the Sharm el-Sheikh agenda and in particular, the Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan and the practical implications of the emphasis of what's so-called SHIP, the Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan, on what we really mean by just equitable transitions and how we can encompass the pathways that include energy, socio-economic implications, implications on the labor markets, and other dimensions. And while you can always talk about these kind of principles, nobody would really disagree with the elements of justice, with the elements of inclusion, minimizing the cost on the society. But when it comes to implementation and practice, there is a lot to be desired. And I would say here it's basically because of the complicated design of projects. Many of us were in Glasgow when the very big announcement of the commitment of 8.5 billion to South Africa was announced. And that was basically, I would say, if there is any big announcement came out from Glasgow about the practical dimensions of the climate action and finance, it was that big announcement. So far, we know that the progress in this project needs a lot of effort for it to be implemented. But I think one of the outcomes of the discussions after almost 2 years of our meetings in Glasgow, that the order that this project in the JETP had to be put not just in the narrative, but on the operationalization of the JETP initiative need to be reversed. Because as you may remember, it was about phasing out from coal, phasing in renewables, and then checking the impact on society. Now, the kind of wisdom based on better engagement with society, say, well, please check the impact first on society and those are going to be impacted and affected by this new project. Then show me what is that alternative, what is the cost, and what could be the good environmental, climate, and development impact of this project. And then, and perhaps simultaneously, we can really consider the phasing down or the phasing out. It's not just about a conceptual framework, it's a practical framework. I think JETP, in the progress of the other projects in Vietnam and Indonesia, and we're more involved through GFANS Africa to support the JETP initiative in Senegal, which could be less complicated than other examples because it has the emphasis on investing in renewables. There is a little of phasing out there. So the controversy could be less and the cost of restructuring could be less. But definitely the cost of introducing new energy is huge, and the public-private partnership needs to be adequately designed. So this is basically on how to cascade this global perspective into local project-based kind of approach, because these global initiatives coming from global perspectives, platforms, G7, and then pushing them into the local agenda need really to have better engagement at the local level. So if there is anything that we can really do for the just energy transition operationalization is to empower the local community, the cities, the townships, and the impacted or affected communities to prioritize their needs first and better tailoring for these projects in a kind of more collaborative approach. And as I was trying to say yesterday in the discussions on localization and the role of municipalities, it is not anymore centralization versus decentralization. It's not anymore bottom-up or top-down. It's a collaborative, inclusive model because you cannot really do one without the other. You cannot do private in the absence of public where it comes with its own concessional finance and standards. You cannot just talk about local level and ignoring what could be coming from the standards and the finance coming from the center of the state. This common sense approach has been very much missing in the discussion, and I very much appreciate that in our discussions here in Nairobi, this kind of simple, straightforward way of getting a more collaborative perspective between the global and the local level had been discussed better. Discussed better, this is not the end of the story, it needs to be implemented better. And for that, actually, we are encouraging, especially those who are engaged at the local level, and with Razan and I would just, in a meeting with the Marrakesh partners, encouraging by the 15th of October, if you have any useful idea that Razan and I can really bring to COP28, please bring that in terms of either ask or offer attached to that a dollar sign by the 15th of October through the mechanism that we have as champions, and you can reach out to us directly as champions or through the UNFCCC for that to be staged properly, but more important than the staging in COP28 is to be included in our agenda. We have been proving here that doing better at the global level by announcements should really be matched by the do at, or the implementation at the local level. To keep the 1.5 degrees alive, that needs efforts on finance, technology, R&D, and capacity development, and incentive structure. And in many cases, this had been missing. In order to do a better job, we have been seeing that there is a role for the regional dimension. And many of the projects, especially in energy, given the requirements, may not really be limited or constrained to a national level. So some sort of good collaboration at sub-regional level would be very much warranted. And I'm happy here to see, in particular, in the green hydrogen, there is a kind of regional perspective to that. Moving into specifically into this, and I'll end with a couple of things related to the new sources. As mentioned almost by everybody from the speakers, representing states. When it comes to solar, and when we know now the technology, and we know that through investments in R&D, the cost of obtaining these projects have been very much significantly reduced. When it comes to green hydrogen, we need another dimension. The technology, the R&D are very much important, but the stability of demand and the commitment of demand, because all of these projects are coming with export orientation. Given their cost, none of these projects will be feasible without this kind of external demand. It's not just with a kind of empty promise or an MOU even, but this requires legally binding contractual arrangements through agreements for offtake. My concern here, and I know that many of you have the contacts, we need more stability coming from the demand side, especially from Europe, because the strategy when it comes to energy are not stable enough for many of us to design 5, 10, or 15 years kind of scenarios for investments in green hydrogen. There will be a session in an hour or two about green hydrogen specifics, but again, this is an example that the technology have been now available, that there is interest on the supply side. There are some investments in human capital and skills required, but what is really missing is the higher risk and even uncertainty when it comes to the stability of the demand from potential contracts with, especially with the European Union, that needs really to be put into consideration, especially with what we know now that one of the leaders of the green hydrogen discussions and negotiation, Mr. Timmermans of the EU, now has another political assignment or ambitions to fulfill. So here, some sort of institutional commitments would be in need for emphasis. Then the final part here is basically on the conclusions and learnings from the dialogue. How will that be feeding into the design and definition of just energy transition collaborative framework? And that is basically something that this kind of discussion, we can always say, yes, we are going to be growing our energy capacity based on renewables and alternative energy, and everybody will be happy with more solar, more wind. But we need really to consider two things. One, about, as I tried to mention the specific case in South Africa, what are we going to be doing with coal and the impacted economies and society? And then the elephant in the room is basically natural gas. And, and the alternative here is basically about safety and access and protecting of forests and women. Or you can just ignore that and say, well, we're waiting for the good moment when we're going to be seeing renewables. But there could be in some countries, not all of the countries, a source that is definitely cleaner, but not the cleanest of sources of energy, which comes in the source of natural gas. What we should really be doing about that? To what extent we can be pragmatic? What are the safeguards? What are the timeline for phasing out? What will assure us that this will not really be a kind of a permanent third or second best that would really compromise our efforts towards cleaner versions of energy? But here, in this kind of complicated world, we're not talking here about taking opportunities badly, but to be more pragmatic and to align finance long-term in order to assure us with sources of renewable energy, managing the transition properly, and getting this issue about the societal impact at the very beginning of the discussion, not as a kind of afterthought, and assume with great deal of generosity that this is going to be taken care of through some sort of compensation. Having said that, this is a tough topic. It needs experts on energy, experts on social development, and definitely experts on sustainable development and partnerships. Good luck with your discussions. Thank you. So shall I keep that? Or? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Mohildeen, for those framing remarks. Can I have two claps? 2 claps. Thank you. So he actually led us directly into our next segment. We are showcasing one of our projects since we started the Africa Regional Forum last year. We put together a project compendium highlighting the various climate projects in the continent and bringing them together with investors. And today we will be showcasing one that deals with clean cooking, and it's a clean cooking venture that's replacing wood fuels for cooking with LPG. And this is in line with the last remarks that Dr. Muhildeen mentioned. And so it is my pleasure to welcome Emmanuel to the stage. Yeah. Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Emmanuel Ejay Mensah. I'm from Arch Holdings in Ghana. In 2013, we decided to establish a program for Ghana that is replacing wood fuels with LPG. Now, globally, at that time, 3 billion people were using dirty fuels, wood fuels, animal waste, etc. That was very polluting. In Ghana, the figure is 70%. So we have 21 million people in Ghana using wood fuels. Using wood fuels is very dirty and very bad for the environment. I'm sure we all know that. We are cutting down our trees and releasing tons and tons of carbon into the atmosphere. It also kills people. Globally, it's killing about 3.8 million a year. In Ghana, we lose close to 50,000 people a year due to the use of wood fuels. And then it caused a lot of economic losses. The World Bank estimated in 2016 that globally countries are losing 1.52 trillion. It's trillion, not billion, dollars in economic losses. So transition from wood fuels to something cleaner will be good for the environment. It will save lives and then reduce poverty. So our mission is to save the environment, to save lives, and reduce poverty. The challenge we had was what fuel? We selected LPG for various reasons, and we encountered a lot of resistance. I'll talk about that at the last end of my presentation. So we are an industrial group in Ghana. We are into trading, distribution, marketing. We have terminals. We own the largest terminal infrastructure in Ghana. We are into power generation. We have an interest in a power plant. We do technology and other services. Now, since 2013, when we launched our clean cooking program, we've invested 138 million to move the program forward. To do what we wanted to do, you needed infrastructure. One, you need a business model that is scalable. We are not looking at a small, localized project that will benefit a few people. We wanted something that will have a nationwide impact. So you need a business model that can be scaled up rapidly, not something that will take us years and years before we get clean cooking to the mass of the people. So we invested $138 million over the period up to the year 2021. We have storage facilities. We own the LPG discharge infrastructure. We've created a backbone to be able to receive all the LPG that is needed to achieve our program and beyond. Now, the next phase of our project now is the distribution end, where now we interface with the final consumer and do the migration. And the reason why it's taking us this long to get to that stage was regulation. When you want to do something at a national scale the way we want to do it, you need to be aligned with government policy and regulation. So we've been working with governments, and luckily for us, after years of engagement, this month, government has formally passed the policy, and now we have the regulatory framework to implement the model that we want to implement. And that's the CRM model, the cylinder recirculation model. In Ghana now, to buy LPG, you fill your cylinder like you fill your cars. You own your cylinder, you carry it to a station, they fill it, and then you bring it back. So it's not scalable. You can't scale it to everywhere that you want LPG to be available. The CRM is what has been proven globally to be scalable. Between the years 2010 and 2022, China, India, Indonesia have moved 700 million people using the CRM from using dirty fuels to LPG, which is a clean fuel, using the CRM. So that's proving to yield results. So now in the second phase, this is what we are doing. We are investing 145 million in various infrastructure, in the bottling infrastructure, in acquisition of cylinders. We need to acquire a lot of cylinders. Our initial program is 2 million cylinders. Subsequently, we add on more. You need to have a nationwide distribution network. Now you operate like Coca-Cola. You fill your bottles at a central plant, and you distribute it through a distribution system, just like Coca-Cola. So we need to build that network. And I want to build a cylinder manufacturing facility locally rather than importing. So that's in total the 145 million that we are prepared or working at investing over the next 2 years. Now the impact of our project, it is huge. The carbon savings are huge. People will stop cutting down the trees. When you cut down trees, you have two carbon effects. You cut it down and you burn it. So the burning releases carbon into the atmosphere. And then when the trees are alive, they are removing carbon from the atmosphere every day, every hour. When you cut them down, you lose the carbon sink effect. So it has a double effect. So we've estimated that over the period to 2030, we'll be saving close to 40 million metric tons of carbon with our project. Black carbon is responsible for 20% of global warming. Most conversations don't talk about black carbon, but it's responsible for 20% of global warming. Our project saves 60,000 per annum of black carbon. We are saving about 45,000 lives per annum in Ghana. Because when you cook, I have some pictures I had to take off, but when you cook with household, the wood, you have a lot of fumes into the atmosphere. Those particulates, you breathe it in, and people start having pulmonary diseases. So it kills a lot of people, especially children under the age of 5. It's one of the key killers of children under the age of 5. And we are saving about 45,000 lives. There's a lot of health effect from people going to not being able to go to work, the investment in the healthcare system to take care of those people. Our government is losing 200 million from that investment. And then the trees that we save, by not cutting down the trees, we are saving the trees. Now, what that means is that the desertification that is happening in our country will cease. Ghana is divided into two. The middle part and the upper part of it is the savanna. We actually don't have forests there. The forests are all at the southern part. The savanna is not trees. They are small, small shrubs. So the equivalent of one forest and one offset savanna land, probably 1:50. So any calculation that says one forest, you can multiply it by 50. If you don't do something now, by 2030, there will probably be no tree or no forest to start calculating on. Everywhere will be desert. And that will have massive impact on the income of the people who are living in those areas. So it's not going to be 3 million forever. We are saving 3 million for a time, and then subsequently, because if we don't do nothing today, there will be nothing to save. Everything will be gone. Now, on our new project, this is where we are. We are raising 145 million, 122 million in debt, and 22.5 in equity. We are providing the full equity, so the debt we are on the market to raise. We already have 18.7, the commitment for 18.7, but the project continues. We invested 14.1 million already, and it's continuing. Now, I've just a little bit of time. I want to spend it on the lessons we've learned over the past 10 years. The number one lesson was why LPG? And it took us a lot of conversations. Luckily, other people picked it up. Africa Development Bank picked it up. International Energy Agency picked it up. And they supported in that conversations in being able to make the case that LPG is a just transitional fuel for a lot of African countries, because there's no alternative. And LPG is available currently. There is no project that is invested in because of LPG. LPG is always a byproduct, either from oil refinery, or from gas processing plants. already the supply exists. People are flaring LPG because they don't have use for it. So the alternative to flaring is using it to do good, using it to save the environment, save life, and improve incomes. I don't think it's a difficult thing to think that with a little investment, we can make use of this natural resource that currently is being flared in order to save the environment, and then work towards 10 years, 15 years when a just and a proper and a workable and a scalable solution comes. At this moment, I don't see the scalable solution. The international community supports clean cook stoves. And I've been making this point over and over again. You are still cutting down the trees. You are just improving efficiency from maybe 10, 15% to 30, 40%, but you are still cutting down the trees. LPG saves up the trees. So that's the biggest problem that we've had. And I think this conversation should try to encourage more people that LPG is available. Let's encourage those who want to use it at scale. In the short term, whilst we work on a permanent renewable solution that will come at a later date. And because of that, we had a lot of issues with raising funding because most funders immediately said that no, this is not acceptable. LPG is a fossil fuel. Fossil fuel is out of our program. We don't support. We need to put this back on the agenda and encourage that this is the fuel that is needed in most African countries if we are to migrate people from the fuel they are using to clean fuel and save the environment, save lives, and improve people's income. The second one, I've talked about it already, which is government policy. You always, to deploy this at scale, you need government support. The private sector cannot do it alone. So the engagement should bring down and have government sit down to decide how do we create the necessary frameworks and the necessary policies to support the use of LPG at scale. So you can move the mass of people in several countries from the use of wood fuels to LPG. I think my time is up. Thank you very much. Is there a question and answer, or that's it? One question. Okay. No, I'm asking whether am I receiving questions for that? Oh, okay. Is there any question that I can attempt to answer?
I'm the Executive Director of the African Center for Green Economy, a think tank based in South Africa. My question is related to the risk of stranded assets. You said that obviously we need to exploit LPG now to address the energy access challenges that we face. And you are potentially going to invest quite substantial amount of money in infrastructure. How are you going to then in the long-term transition those infrastructure that you have into much more renewable or acceptable infrastructure? And what are the kind of risks that you perceive in terms of these assets that you have invested in, and what is the strategy in terms of a long term to de-risk those assets that you're investing in?
Look, I'm an entrepreneur, so we take risks, and sometimes you take certain risks based on your gut feeling and what you want to do. Now, we started 2013. In 2015, the UN published the SDGs. And they mandated, or they set a goal of clean cooking for all by 2030. 8 years have passed, nothing has happened. If in 2015 funds have gone into LPG, by now we have achieved the objective. And then it will have run for a number of years, and the asset will have yielded the results. But we are where we are, so no results. We still have 7 years to go. I think that we need to deploy all the money today to achieve the UN objective by 2030. Now, in terms of the flip side, on full renewables, there is talk about bio-LPG. And bio-LPG have similar characteristics to the fossil LPG. So the same infrastructure being deployed today can be used for bio-LPG. So our intention now is let's solve the problem now with the facilities and the resources that are available. When that is done, we'll start looking at investing in bio-LPG because we can use the same assets. Next question. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mugisha Imam, Executive Director at Youth Concerns on Environment and Development. We are based in Uganda. I have, misconception. You're talking of energy transition, but is it a matter of transiting or it's an issue of energy progression? Later in this year, August, we have seen the countries like, the Prime Minister of UK come up and said that, we have to, to reinvest again in oil and gas. But these are the countries that we have seen that have transited to a certain level. In Uganda, in July, our president came up and said, no, we are putting a ban on charcoal without providing, reliable alternatives. But I see your project, is totally no issue of transition, issue of energy progression. If you are transit, three things must be available. First, finances, alternative, sources, like if they are available, are they really available? Then the second one, the third one, issue of capacity building, because communities can't, adapt at the same level. We have like, in the global south, we are going transit at a different level. Kenya shall have its own transition, Uganda shall have its own transition, but at the end of the day, we have to come up with the consolidated call to action to see where we want to be at the finances available. So kindly look into the issue of energy progression and transition.
I wonder if a question or a contribution. But for us, it's a transition. We are migrating people from wood fuels to the use of LPG. That is what we are doing. And then thereafter, we'll look at the next thing in a more renewable way that we need to move to. Funding has been difficult, but we are making progress. The project already started, and we are moving on. I'm very optimistic that we can raise the required money that we need to implement our plan within the next 2 years. It's much better. The conversations are much better now than it used to be in 2014, 2015 when we started. So I think we'll get there. Okay.
Emmanuel, thank you so much. I know there's two more questions, the gentleman at the front and the one at the back, but Emmanuel is right here. You could ask him bilaterally, he's not going anywhere, and this is the point of this in-person events. I just want to again say thank you to Emmanuel for making the journey to Kenya and to making the case for LPG in displacing charcoal and leading to deforestation and obviously the environment and health co-benefits and of course the emissions reductions that come with this displacement of deforestation by sourcing charcoal. And as Emmanuel just said, this is why we need actors like the businesses like himself that is deploying solutions to achieve the UN targets. The UN is not capable of achieving its own mandated target. It needs all actors across the ecosystem and across society, the non-state actor community. With that, I want to bring on stage a distinguished set of panelists that bring perspective from different types of actors on the just energy transition. So, and because of time constraints, we will only have 20 minutes. I will immediately get into it. So please come on stage, my good friend and climate comrade, Sherop Soy, who is the SC for All Africa Youth Ambassador, and also a younger member. She's wearing a mask. She's feeling a bit unwell, so we will sequester you to the end of this. And Mark Napier, CEO, Financial Sector, Deepening Africa, Specialized Development Agency working on strengthening financial markets in Africa, but they also have a particular interest in addressing climate in Africa by investing in climate-compatible projects. And Mark is also a board member of GFunds Africa. So and Amar Namda, CEO of Kawisafi, playing an instrumental role as a renewable energy investor. And Amar, I just don't want to preempt any discussion, but I'll let you tell the audience about the recent capital injection your investment firm recently received. And if you have some ideas, this is an investor on the stage, so you might want to speak with him, right? Actually, anyone on stage might invest in your project. And then Wangari Mushiri, wind expert, renewable energy engineer, Africa director, Global Wind Energy Projects. Welcome, sir. What did you say? Global Wind Energy Council, yes. The last thing before I join you on the panel is so we'll have two opportunities to address the audience. So if you could keep your first remarks pretty short, I will come back to all four of you for a second question. So with that, let me join you on the panel. Okay, great. Let's start with the youth speaker, since I feel bad for putting you at the end of the table. But Cherop, maybe I have your question here. If we could just, I have it now. If we could, I'd be quite interested to get your view on the JETP process. The first ever country to get a JETP is in Africa, and the last country to just get a JETP earlier this year is an African country. So I want to hear your perspective on that and the many ways young people are calling for enabling the just energy transition, like advocacy, policy influence, etc. So it would be good to get your perspective on that, Cherop, or over to you.
Thank you so much, Jabri, and thank you everyone for making the time. I hope you can hear me clearly through the mask. I'm not feeling that well. My opinion on the JETP having the first country to be African and the last to be African just is to show that Africa is a continent where we have potential and all the attention is now being focused within our continent, and that means that we do have a role to play as Africans. It's often the narrative that we are disadvantaged and have the shortest end of the stick, and that's what I really fight to change the narrative and flip the script and see it in a positive light, that Africa has the potential and all eyes are on us, but it's also up to us as Africans and all level stakeholders to be part of the conversation. And the JETP in collaboration poses a good foundational starting point to elevate us to get to the next level. In terms of advocacy, sometimes I find that advocacy is overlooked, not as important as having the finance and the policy and implementation, but advocacy is a very important foundational principle to get anything going, and young people have been known to really fill up the advocacy spaces. Not to say that they're not in the science, technology, innovation, and investment, but they are the ones who are taking up this space, and they're actually utilizing the advancements in technology to make sure that advocacy is on the table and to get the conversations kick-started.
Thank you so much, Cherop. As you said, the foundational principles of advocacy is the kind of catalyzing point that leads to all this money being deployed, all these initiatives being catalyzed. So I want to thank the global youth movement for that, and also the dual role that young people play as experts, but also pushing the agenda and keeping pressure on incumbent leadership. So with that, I think I'll move on to you, Mark. I have a question here for you. It's a bit controversial, but I know you can be able to answer this. So I know FSDA, I do want to ask a question around FSDA's key role. So are you currently engaged with any national government or any kind of state institution and anything that could contribute to Africa's just energy transition? And maybe also your opinion, what is some of the best practices of the collaborations that can be made between when a national government works with any sort of non-state actor that is not government?
Thank you, Jabri. That was a short question. Can I not answer it? Just because I just wanted to make a I just wanted to make one point above all, which is, so I really like the topic of this panel, actually, because I like the political nature of this discussion, because it's really, really very important. So where it goes, who gets access to finance and financial inclusion, of course, who gets access now to investment capital is also really key. So I just wanted to put it out there, but also to say that finance has a democratizing, if finance works well, it has a democratizing effect on society, because basically the money should go to the best projects. That's the way finance works. So financiers want to give money to the best projects. They don't want to finance projects that are politicians' projects or bad community projects, because they want their money back. And good projects means long-term growth, means long-term jobs and prosperity, and everybody should benefit. I just wanted to put it out there, because I know that finances sometimes seem to be on the other side of the fence, and it's not, in my view. So yes, we are involved with a number of different governments. We have some work in the energy sector, but what we realize with governments is, with finance, is that in order to get financial markets working in the way that we want them to work, we have to work with all elements of the architecture, the financial system, and that starts with the policymakers, it starts with the regulators at the top, but it also needs to critically involve the private sector as well. And so we find that there is an inexplicable gulf, really, often between the private sector people who are trying to find projects and the government people who are trying to regulate something they don't really fully understand. And so we do see our role as being a little bit of a bridge in that. And so if we can, we spend a lot of time forging sort of partnerships and opportunities for stakeholders in financial markets to get together and actually help each other sort of demystify each other's jobs, if I can put it like that. And so we work with industry associations as well, so helping to bridge gaps between, let's say, the bankers associations or the insurance associations and government. And that's, we can also do that on an international level as well. So how can we help international investors look for projects locally as well? So that's kind of some of the things that we do.
Thanks so much, Mark. Absolutely, finance is deeply political. Like, who gets the money, who deploys the money, how much money, in what way you get that money. But obviously, the other part of it is finance underpins all forms of climate action. That's where it starts. And I think it's a good kind of leverage point that we're having this summit, because as you have noticed, we have a lot of more financial commitments achieved at within the summit. The last thing I'll just reflect on your point, Mark, I've written down here, is that bridging role that non-state actors can play, and hopefully ensuring government creates some sort of value and investment and does not impede it. That is obviously key in this discussion. So Amar, I'll pass to you next. It would be great to get your remarks and your perspective on what is the 1, 2, 3 key unblockers that would help non-party stakeholders and institutions like SAFI accelerate the just energy transition, because it's not always easy to fix such a global agenda if there are barriers in place. Thanks.
No, thanks, Jabri, and great comments already coming across from the panel, and really appreciate the last two talks as well in terms of setting some context here. Yeah, we're an investor in businesses like Emmanuel's. We don't invest in LPG. We're only a renewables investor, and we can have a little bit of a discussion about the balance that sits in that space. But we're here to really look for businesses that are local, that are here in these markets. We're a Nairobi-based outfit. We're trying to bring international capital into these markets and make them available to businesses that serve people across the continent that might be underserved by other forms of capital and other forms of technology, and really ensure that that happens in a way that's equitable and is affordable, right? So we're looking for energy solutions that are affordable, inclusive to all. What are some of the blockages here? I mean, I think on the one hand, I like Mark's precision around finance being a discipline where you want to be able to make returns, and you don't get too seduced by the sort of crazy ideas out there. You're there to try to do things that are pragmatic and do things that are practical. But there's a really interesting number that I have in my head. The Bridgetown Initiative just did some work leading up to the next COP. 81% of green infrastructure investment projects in the developed world are private sector backed. When you start looking at this continent, that number drops to less than 14%. So there's not that much private capital that comes to work in this market. And there are some really good reasons for why that isn't. And I think all of those good reasons are because we've created an architecture that doesn't reward investors to participate in this market. And we need to unblock those flows of capital by making that more applicable. Some of it is about real risk, right? If we could have more stable regulatory environments, if we could have country systems, business environments that allow for projects to happen, and there's more predictability about those projects, then there would be more private capital flows. Some of it is about off-taker risk. If you have heavily indebted governments, heavily indebted buyers, buyers with lower purchasing powers, that tends to be economically harder to serve. And that's just a fact. Those are harder to serve. And some of it is FX risk. I mean, we've all been watching and participating in these markets in the last few years. You've seen currencies depreciate against the US dollar. If you're borrowing in dollars and selling in shillings or in naira, your costs have suddenly ballooned. Your balance sheets have suddenly gone haywire, and you can't pay your debts. So these are real things that are really, that are fundamentally impacting businesses on the ground. We're very close to it. We have a big portfolio of investments that we've made over the last few years. We have new capital to try to deploy into this market, which we want to do over the next few years. But we have to try to shift this balance to make, the observation we have is how many businesses in Europe and the US could make a profit when they're paying 17% on their debts. Not very many. Yet we're being held to the same standard in this region, and I think that's a real challenge for so many of our businesses. And there is this observation that we make that capital seems cheap to those that can afford it. It seems very expensive to those that cannot afford it. And we need to start unpicking how to open that door a bit wider and potentially start to kick it down a bit harder.
Thanks, Omar. I just did you want to talk about the GCF announcement as well?
I can talk a little bit about the GCF announcement. So we've been long-term partners with GCF, with the Green Climate Fund. They're a large institution. They have some. They take a long time to make decisions. Let's put that out there. But they've been an essential ally to us in this space. Now, what have they done? They've in effect made concessional capital available to the market through intermediaries like ourselves. So we're one of several and many, and I hope a growing ecosystem of service providers here in this market. Right? I mean, we see ourselves very local. I am Kenyan. We're here. The critical thing that GCF has done is tried to take some leadership in terms of making capital available to economically sound projects, so companies, entrepreneurs, etc., and do that at a cheaper rate than many of the other DFIs or many of the other private lenders. We're an equity investor, so we'll invest equity to support entrepreneurs to grow. Equity is much more flexible than debt, and it's technically we take a bigger burden in equity because we take a bigger risk, but we don't often get the reward for taking that bigger risk, and there's a liquidity challenge out there that we all confront. But the Green Climate Fund has been really supportive into this environment and looked for ways to find intermediaries like ourselves to then invest into companies that would be able to bring energy access. That's our first fund, bring energy access to underserved populations across the continent.
Thanks, Omar. The only reflection I have of that is that, yeah, we completely agree that we need to absolutely find the many ways to reduce the cost of capital in Africa, and especially on the perceived risk by credit rating agencies that hike up the way we deploy capital in Africa, the region that is most kind of susceptible to climate shocks. So that is I think it's the absolute priority. And that, Wangari, I just want to come to you now. Institutions like GWEC, Global Wind Energy Council, play an instrumental role in catalyzing initiatives like the GRA, the Global Renewables Alliance. So in what ways do you envision GWEC contributing to the JET process, enabling maybe the JETP process? And if there was political will to involve more non-state actors like yourselves, in what bigger role could you play? So, pass to you.
Great, thank you so much, Jabri. I think that's a fantastic question. Just like Mark, I'm not going to answer it first. I will come to it. So GWEC is a trade institution that really represents the wind industry. We represent about 90% of all wind developers, manufacturers. I mean, you name it, they're probably our members. And in addition to that, we are part of an initiative. I see my colleague Emerson sitting in the crowd, so you can hound him with questions after. Emerson, you can wave just in case. But we also are part of the Global Renewables Alliance, which is wind, solar, hydropower, geothermal, green hydrogen, and batteries coming together. And this is all the private sector bodies that represent the different technologies. We're coming together to say you don't have to choose, but we can work together to help you transition. I know the conversation before was around LPG and natural gas, but there are solutions that we can offer within the renewable energy space. And I'm a big proponent for, e-cooking, e-cooking, solar cooking, renewable-based cooking, and a lot of those opportunities that I think we can start to take advantage of and build capacity around. So when you look at the JETPs at present, we're seeing a lot of the conversation around gas coming into play in Africa. And this worries me because sometimes it's not really fully aligned to the 1.5 pathway. I'll give you an example. I've seen drafts where countries that have significant renewable energy in their energy mixes, the JETP process is actually taking them back to introduce more fossil fuels into their energy mixes. So I think it's important that we really consider what sort of targets we're setting with the JETPs. But I do want to caveat that and say, in some countries, and only 16 out of the 54 African countries have significant and explorable oil and gas reserves. They should, if it's cheap in their countries like Mozambique, Tanzania, they should consider that. But it's not the full story for Africa, and I think it's important that we emphasize in which countries this is important. Ghana is a country that has, gas reserves, so yes, I understand the conversation that is going on, but there is other opportunities that we can look at across the continent. The second thing I think we need to look at with the JETPs is that it's really only focused on the power sector. And as we know, we have a lot of intersecting interests. We have land use, we have transport, we have even buildings. How do we incorporate all those different interests into the JETPs? And at the moment, when you look at one sector, really it can be a bit limiting. The other thing that I want to highlight, and I'm just going through these quickly because I know I don't have a lot of time, is we've seen in South Africa, since the JETP was announced at COP26, ESCOM has been in crisis. So they've not been able to really implement some of the stuff that's come out of the JETP. And we're not really looking at correcting or strengthening the institutions that really will enable the JETPs to be able to take off the ground. So if we're able to also focus some of those institutions, I think Mark talked about bringing together associations and different bodies to be able to, around this issue. It's important to have different people across the table, whether it's CSOs, the bankers associations, the lenders, whoever it is, because all those opinions really play a factor into that. And then the fourth thing that I really wanted to highlight is, in the not answering of your question, is we need to really define what this just is, but also we need to define how long this transition is. And I think a previous speaker said, oh, first we want to look at this fuel and then in future look at renewables. How long is that going to take? Is that a 20-year process? Is that a 50-year process? And so it's important for us to really highlight and define those. So now to answer your question, I think part of where we can really play a role as GWEC, I think, is in capacity building, ensuring that people know there are technologies that can be used in this transition that are readily available. But not just to use the technology. Why are we not the ones manufacturing the technology? We can't only benefit from importing solar cells from China for the rest of our lives, for the next 20 years. We need to build capacity locally, ensure that the skills transfer, ensure that our African engineers are well versed with EVs and e-cooking and solar and wind and green hydrogen. Those are the really, really important things that we need to ensure we're transferring. In addition to that, I think one of the things that's really passionate to us at the GRA, or close to home, is we can come up with a transition plan. We can say, we want to transition to this much renewable energy by a certain time, but who's going to offtake this renewable energy? Are we coming in on the other end and saying, let's get commitments for all these green products, green hydrogen, green ammonia, green steel? Who's going to be the people who take on that? And we need to also work within this JETP process to make sure that we are aligning the supply and the demand side as well. And then finally, I promise I'm going to stop. We need to ensure that we really highlight best practice. And we are seeing areas across the world, in Vietnam, and now even in Senegal, there will be some best practice. So how do we take advantage of that best practice, tell those stories, use that knowledge to transfer to each other, to share what is working, what is not working. I know, even speaking from the JETP team in South Africa a few months ago, there are certain lessons they've already learned, but they've already secured $8.5 billion, right? And now they're realizing they need more than that. And on top of that, they're now realizing we need to define from the beginning where to start. Is it transitioning the coal plants? Is it closing them down? Is it reskilling workers? Is it ensuring that we bring in the technology and start manufacturing? So it's important to also learn lessons from each other. And I think best practice shared is going to be the way to go as well. Thank you. And I really condemn, I really commend you. Sorry.
Hopefully
I really
not
commend you,
condemn.
not condemn, sorry. I commend you on this type of conversation. It's great to hear that it's going to happen in other regions as well.
No, thank you so much, Wangari, and the entire panel. I just want to, I will steal 2 minutes, I apologize, but to reflect on that and to pass to my panel for just 30 seconds each. But I think we absolutely need to build manufacturing capacity in Africa that will also off-take this renewable energy potential that we talk about when we start doing generation projects. But I also like that GRA is technology agnostic, and it's not solar versus wind, even though Electricana wind power has a 62% capacity factor. So it's that is undeniable. And the last thing is, I think if we take something away from this panel is that African countries does not have the same decarbonization strategies, and we should not try to kind of pit African countries against each other. Kenya versus Nigeria. Kenya has very lucky to have geothermal technical potential as we are at the Rift Valley, but not many countries are privileged to have this. So with that, I just want to give each of my, because I don't like when panelists only have one opportunity to address the audience. If you could each have 30 seconds, please, to remark on kind of just how we should shape the JETCO initiative, because we are building this out. So what are some of the elements that we should add into the JETCO that you think is absolutely important? Wangari, I'll start with you, and then up to Jerome.
I definitely love that you've put the collaboration part of it with the JETCO, because bringing everybody early into this conversation is going to be important. So please invite us to the meetings. As GRA, as GWEC, I think it's quite key that we're there. And we're able to also provide insights from our members on what's working. I think just because a country says they want to transition, we really need the right enabling environment for that to happen. And we're able to share what that looks like for private sector. So I think it's important to have all of us around the table. Thank you.
I thought you did a great summary. This is a complicated continent with 54 countries. Horses for courses, right? There are different strategies and pathways in each country. What are some of the underlying principles? I think the core thing for me, what I hear over and over and over on the ground is, let's close the gap between what's being said at big meetings like this, the many billions of dollars that we talk about being allocated and committed, to actually making something happen on the ground. So my, I don't know if it's advice, my hold up in terms of a principle is demonstrate results quickly, show what can be done on the ground, because that's the one thing that will really drive appetite and success back into the process, as opposed to yet another talking shop where we will have discussions about how complicated the world is and how difficult this challenge is.
Thank you, Jabri. I feel I didn't make my point land enough, which is that if we are to create whatever consultative forums or steering groups or those sorts of entities to support JETCO processes, please make sure that the private sector is part of that discussion. Not even people like me. I mean, I'm ex-private sector, but people who really do manage money, banks, but also asset managers as well. So private equity. That's one thing. And the second thing is around on the project development, and just to channel Amar briefly here, is that if you want to really do the right thing by your local community, you need to work with local intermediaries. So you need to bring them into the picture as well. And sometimes they don't look like normal private equity firms, right? But you have to have the courage, I think, to back people who are getting money to local businesses that might benefit from this. And we've done that a little bit at FSD Africa, but we need a systemic approach to backing sort of alternative local capital providers and giving them the support that we need. Because, and I just wanted to also echo what Mahmoud has said on many occasions, which is, let's not talk about billions to trillions, let's talk about billions to hundreds of millions, or even hundreds of millions down to tens of millions. Let's just get something happening, an actual transaction on the ground, not some sort of airy-fairy concept of a series of transactions. Let's really get close to the ground.
From where I sit, I would like to see an inclusive, a people-centered transition But on top of that is for us to have a frank and address the challenges that we often don't want to speak on. So I would like to see alternative scenarios and options, including those of fossil fuel reliant economies.
Thank you so much to my panel. If you could please give my panel a quick round of applause. It's a difficult discussion. With that, if you could exit stage right, that would be fantastic. And now we'll go to the next segment where I. Okay. Huh? After. Oh, this gentleman is a very senior gentleman. Okay. Thank you so much. And we had to respect our elders, so we had to take that photo. So I want to welcome the next session, my colleague Mariam Alam, who is a seasoned Egyptian diplomat, part of the COP27 presidency, and now leads our Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda in the Climate Champions team, where she will be talking about some of the resilience objectives that can fit into this just energy transition. Mariam, welcome to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jabri, and thanks to everyone in the room. So as Jabri has introduced, I currently have the pleasure of leading the implementation of the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda that seeks to really present tangible solutions on adaptation and resilience. It translates what is adaptive capacity, strengthening resilience, and reducing vulnerability in tangible actions across each of the system. It can be seen as an implementation, action-oriented arm to implementing the global goal and adaptation, the policy framework, what once agreed. But I'm really here for one message, and I think the last speaker, the young lady, has put me on a very good track to say my message. And also the thought-provoking question that Bogolo had asked earlier, what are we transitioning from and are we transitioning to? And it's different in different contexts. And in Africa, adaptation and resilience needs to be at the core of the just transition or framework or pathway, however we choose to frame it. We can no longer deal with resilience as an afterthought or address it as a piecemeal. I think we've heard in all of the interventions of the previous speakers, from Dr. Mahmoud setting the scene to everyone who had spoke, elements of financial resilience, economic resilience, societal resilience, but also at some point we need to bring in ecosystem resilience and integrated nature responses. So particularly the case for Africa, frontline communities. Warming in Africa is happening faster than the global average surface temperatures, leaving populations dealing with extreme impacts such as extreme heat, cyclone, sea level rise. What have we learned so far? We have learned that they have reversed development gains. They have already caused us massive losses and damages. So are we transitioning to low carbon or green and resilient development pathways? Or are we risking building fragile systems that didn't really factor in a systematic manner across systems the impacts that they may be facing? So we speak about different industries, extractive industries, very controversial, agriculture, all of these are risk of reduced water demand. And we already know that this has happened, be it physical scarcity or economic scarcity in Africa due to lacking infrastructures to manage water. Impacts of extreme heat. Africa's population is roughly 60 to 70% of Africa's workforce is employed in agriculture, suffering extreme heat. I can speak to, for example, some impacts from the country where I come from, Egypt. We have recently been hit by intermittent electricity supply because of extreme heat-driven high demand for cooling that the government is not able to meet. And if you look at cooling in that context, one, it's an extreme heat response. Buildings will need to come in as part of the conversations, of course, as an extreme heat response. So extreme heat response, and now we are looking towards cooling, decoupling cooling from increased greenhouse gas emissions. How do we do that? impacts of extreme heat, and I may say the example of Morocco, which was featured in the in the IEA, International Energy Agency, and they have done a very interesting report on the impacts of extreme heat on renewable energy sources and how they have reduced the efficiency of the grids. So they pose major challenges to the distribution networks, and we know that Morocco is a pioneer in CSP. So this is all part of the transition conversation, let alone the fact that, and I'm also here referencing the work of the International Labour Organization, who has done extensive work on the impacts of, I'm just focusing on one impact here to see how one impact of climate has massive implications on the health of workers and their productivity. And the ILO has done multiple reports dating back from maybe 2009, even before that, on the impacts of heat. They have done it extensively for so many regions, but the reduction of productivity, and I think in the, I don't recall the numbers for Africa, but at least in the MENA region, they have caused 30% of the reduction in the productivity of workers. This is something that we have to contemplate as we address our just transition. Many other elements include what I want to say, particularly in this point, is I think that the just transition conversation is a very good opportunity to bring together the worlds of the sustainable development elements, because I think what we are headed towards is a just transition towards low greenhouse gas emission trajectory and resilient economies, as well as societal. So this is a really good point where we can start to bring in both conversations, move away from the silos, adopt a systems thinking approach. And this is what we have really tried to do with the Sharm adaptation agenda. So presenting concrete solutions, integrated one, that address adaptation with mitigation co-benefits, and addressing resilience of peoples, the infrastructure systems and the ecosystems that they are dependent on. But it's not all bad. It's a very complex conversation. But on the flip side, it also poses a business opportunity. So options such as solar water heating, solar water pumping, they are resilient solutions in agriculture, and at the same time, they have their mitigation co-benefits. So this is really the kind of thinking that we need to inject, and we are ready to work on this through the Sharm adaptation agenda. So really, in a nutshell, if we are to leave no one behind, we need to think of the different contexts of the transitions. And it's good to see that these evolving tracks, both under the negotiated space for state actors under the UNFCCC and the non-state actor JETCos framework. I will leave it here, but really I want to hammer on that we need to build systems that are able to adjust and withstand to impacts as they emerge. Instead, we risk building fragile systems, and we risk losing the justice and inclusion elements of the transition. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariam. Thank you very much. I would like to welcome to the floor Habiba Dagash from RMI, Senior Associate. Welcome, Habiba. And Anne Wangbugu. Welcome, Anne. So we invited Habiba and Anne to help us think about how we can land these discussions into real world projects, as we were discussing in previous panels. But we invited you to a dialogue. So what we are trying to do now is asking a few questions to Habiba, to Anne, which would let us frame the discussion, but then open the floor to you. We want to hear you, and we want to have this conversation together about what are the elements that a framework for successfully landing real-world projects fostering just energy transitions should have. So first, we have a question for you, and if you don't mind, I will join you there. And this is just from the top of your mind. Don't think too much. You already thought. From your perspective, just one or two things. What does need to happen to deliver a real-world project fostering just energy transitions on the ground for local communities? One element that can't be missed.
Thank you for having me, Luciano. So just off the top of my head, I'd say demand stimulation. in the sense of in a lot of rural, particularly rural communities, we spoke about agriculture on the previous panel, there isn't a history of those activities being mechanized or electrified. So when you introduce, even if you do the supply side intervention and you have the solar power plant, nobody is going to use the electricity. And that's been the experience we've seen in Nigeria, where we have well over 100 solar mini grids, but the utilization can be well below 40%. And you go into those communities and someone is still manually either cooking the palm fruit or destoning rice when there's an equipment that can do it in like 20 minutes. So that's because as these interventions are designed, there's so much focus on improving energy supply and energy access, but forgetting that people don't know how to use that new energy service that you're introducing.
That's great. Thank you. And have you seen any progress in these areas? Are we at the same place we were some years ago, or?
Some progress, because that's what I work on. For the last 2 years, we've been implementing something called energizing agriculture, which is really going into communities that actually already have microgrids or mini grids systems, but then mapping out what economic activity exists there and figuring out how do we go about introducing technology that can electrify them. So teaching people how they can make money from this electricity. And in terms of more broadly, I think there have been a few what they say productive use interventions from the African Development, from the World Bank, but we're still playing catch up, because I think 5-6 years ago, when the initiatives were designed to finance renewable energy systems in those communities, there was just an assumption that if you put energy there, people will use it. So we are having to play catch up, but the future is to work on both demand and supply side interventions in tandem as we look to scale projects going forward.
Thank you, Habiba. What do you think, Anne? What the first thing that needs to happen to turn PowerPoints into real projects on the ground?
So at Stratfor, we spend a lot of time actually looking at project implementation and the issues around how projects work. So after someone has done a fancy project, most of the time we're the ones who come in and we'll do a bit of research. I'll be in the field doing some research, and then I'll find out something. And one of the biggest problems we've seen, and I'm a quality and standards expert, I spend a lot of time looking at quality and standards, the quality of each of the components that each of you is holding in your hand. And biggest problem we have is that on the demand side, the conversations we're having on the demand side is, like I said, increasing consumption. Let's get people to increase consumption. The question that we have on our end is, what kind of appliances are these people buying? How long are they lasting? And generally, are they serving the purpose that these individuals in these communities are looking to get served? And in that specific context, you find that there's been a lot of issues in terms of there's two movements currently in the world, which I think need to come in strongly in the just energy transition. That is the planned obsolescence. We really need to deal with planned obsolescence if we're going to have the electricity ecosystem grow. There's no, think of powering in the entire world with electricity only for the appliances on the other end not to last for more than 2 years. It is not feasible. There's right to repair. We need to have a conversation, especially in the agricultural sector, about people, because there's been issues about people buying tractors. Let's say we electrify our tractors, and then someone cannot repair their tractor because there's a software inside it. We need to have conversations about right to repair and planned obsolescence.
That's great, thank you. And are we having progress on that?
Complicated question, because in terms of, there's a lot of elements that go into these specific topics. And so far, I think there's a bunch of regulations that are coming in on the European end, let's say on people being able to repair. We need to start small. In short, I don't know how many of you have a small cabinet at home that has a bunch of wires and cables and stuff, and things that you've not used, as phone, whatever. And we need to start at a point where you can repair even just your phone. And that alone is becoming, it's a very controversial conversation, because companies keep saying, we have IP, we have this. On the obsolescence component, it's a complicated question because people need to make money. And if, as Amar said, these are communities which a lot of communities cannot afford to buy very expensive products. So if you increase the lifetime of the product, might be expensive. So it's a very complex question, so to say. But I think headway is being made very slowly. A lot more needs to be done. Yeah. Because, like I said, if we're going to electrify the world, which is what the transition is about, we are asking that we add more appliances into the space, and we cannot afford more dark corners in drawers in people's homes. There's already enough. Yeah.
Thank you. If you had to set the rules for a framework trying to deliver on this, trying to effectively make this happen, how would you phrase it? I'm just copying and pasting that right now.
Like I said, so the people who finance projects might sometimes, I might say something controversial because I do think we need to regulate the heck out of planned obsolescence. I do not think it's okay for a woman, someone in a rural community, to buy an appliance that lasts only for 2 years, not because the appliance lasts for 2 years, but just because someone needs to make another coin out of that same person who's supplying the appliances. So what would I do? There's regulations, but like I said, some of the companies which stand to be on the losing end of this have a lot of money. So something as simple as changing USB-C has been a very complex conversation in the EU. So this is not an easy task, but it's a task for regulators. On the end of users, we have been trying to, I think we have a bunch of studies where we're trying to figure out how to help people identify products that will last longer. Not an easy task in a market, especially where people are very price sensitive, but it's something that we're working towards. Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you both. So now the floor is yours. What we are trying to do here is trying to turn these discussions into real-world projects. Yesterday we had this great meeting on track 2 on financing for city scale through and facilitating finance through multi-level governance. Some of the comments that came up during that conversation was, okay, for example, cities don't have a window for themselves, or sometimes the roadmap is not clear for getting somewhere or for just sharing, bringing together the supply or the potential project with the potential financier for the project, as our colleagues in the previous session mentioned. So this is your turn. We would really like to understand what has worked so far in your experience in Africa, beyond Africa, for perhaps a good practice, a good example of international or local or regional cooperation for making something happen, or maybe just silence because we didn't manage to make something happen yet in some of these aspects. So I invite you to take the floor. Please, you have 2 microphones, one at the left and one at the right. If you want to raise your hand first, or if not, just can go there and take the mic while we have time, and while our experts helping us think about it still have some answers and additional comments for you. Anyone? Please, take the floor. If you could please introduce yourself shortly with name and organization.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for your comments to this panel and to the previous one as well. My name is Lena Dent. I'm from the World Future Council, and I run our energy and just transition work. We're a small nonprofit based in Germany, but we work with international partners. And I think I can't really answer one of these questions directly, but I can feed into it a bit in that one of the challenges we find is that we can't always identify partners on the ground in the communities where we would like to find these solutions, because we just have no way of actually doing the right due diligence or the research to really find where the good work is being done, or where young entrepreneurs are being innovative, or where they're actually looking for partners. So I guess one of the things we struggle with is kind of finding a way to find out And I know that's a network issue. You know, we need to be well networked, but I think it's also something where we in this community of trying to drive social impact and make sure a just energy transition happens would do well to kind of make sure we're all aware of each other. Maybe we need a consolidated effort to make sure we're aware of each other, because there's a lot of platforms, but it would be nice somehow if we knew more about each other, and not just when we come to events like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We spoke also earlier about collaboration between non-party stakeholders to make this happen. In the previous panel, this was part of the conversation, how the private sector could jump in to make this project happen with the public sector, with private finance, with MDBs perhaps, through the risking mechanism, through, I don't know, an offtake agreement or a guarantee even. Any experience to share in that line? You are also, of course, invited to share, ladies.
Just perhaps on the trying to get people in those communities. Unfortunately, there's no shortcuts to really. I think local intermediaries was mentioned on the last panel. There's no shortcut other than going into those communities and finding those partners. I mean, I live in Abuja, and in a lot of the communities that we work in, as a Nigerian, I have to find someone who is the connection if I'm in a part of the country that I'm not familiar with. Because apart from the language barrier, also a lot of the channels that we use to build a lot of these consortia or interventions, it's not the same channels that they use to coordinate their own, whether it's entrepreneurs or youth groups or their own form of civil society organizations. So I think there is really a need to have a presence on the ground. I think there's just no shortcut to that. You can't just sit in an office somewhere and expect that everyone will come to you, regardless of what you're offering, financially or otherwise. And there's a lot of, I would really encourage anyone that's building towards sort of trying to get a consultative forum to discuss just energy transition, really to start building those partnerships on the ground and to have their partners on the ground not just be people in the capitals. It's very easy for me to sit in Abuja and say I represent the whole of Nigeria. That's not true. Find people in communities and diverse communities as well, so you can get a holistic perspective of the opinions, of the amount of behavioral change and community engagement that you will have to do to get them to adopt new practices, new technologies. Unfortunately, that's the hardest part. And I think government has an important role to play here, because I mean, government has that reach. If you go to the middle of a village 9-hour drive in Nigeria, you'll see the president's election campaign posters. So somebody is getting into that community to give them a message. It's just that they're not getting messages beyond things to do with political campaigns. But you can use those very same channels to bring in a lot of these conversations.
So, as researchers, we spend a lot of time actually engaging communities. It's our job. So every other day we'll be doing a study that we need to talk to locals. In terms of cooperation, I'd say let me just speak to international cooperation. I think it's first of all important to understand that each different communities, like she said, work in very different ways. And one of the most important things, if you're to do proper community engagement, is normally to find what we call the community trustees. And they vary depending on the sector you're talking about. So for example, if I'm going to do an electricity project, normally you look for the guy called the local electrician, right? If you're going to do, let me say, a project that's targeting adoption of electric cooking, the best place to start is maybe a local women's group. There's always the entry points, but you really need to be conversant on what are you trying to achieve, because that points you to the who. So it's not, I think what we've seen in the past is that people just walk into communities and pick the next person and say, oh, let's work with you on this. But it's very, identifying the right person in a community is an extremely, it's a dance, so to say. In terms of international cooperation, there needs to be more conversations like this. And when I say like this, it means whenever we meet, we have stakeholder engagement sessions, and a lot of times we'll be invited for different ones by different stakeholders. And every time you go into a meeting, I feel like there's this disingenuous halo that is, like everyone is in there. No one wants to say the truth. I do not want to say, look, I'm here because I want to publish papers. I'm a researcher. That's the trade. That's the currency of my, and someone else needs to say, look, I am government. I need this. And until all of us put our cards on the table, I feel like we'll meet for a lot more of this. We'll do a lot more talking. Because currently I want to get what I want to get done, but then I don't want to admit that I have my own intentions in this process. So, and especially when interacting with private sector, I think private sector are the most, are the most open about their intentions, which is we're here to make money, right? And a good chunk of everyone needs to come on board and say, this is what I'm here to do. These are my personal biases. This is what I am looking to achieve from this process. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I think that can be a great question to shape a little bit different and ask also to the rest of our colleagues. If you allow me, what are you willing to do to make this happen? Anyone jumping in? Please.
Thank you for inviting me. My name is Hassan, and I'm an activist for conservation, environment, and peace. So to run 3 activities is not a joke. Number 2, 3 good days that are long hours to sacrifice what our leaders are saying and heading to. But according to my concept and understanding, such are the places where we can meet and exchange ideas for the betterment of the world. And I am saying sorry for arriving so late, because 3 days schedule were already there in the mail. But for these 2 very sensitive, complex, and building of the world activities which we are conducting at that moment was not relayed in any way, be it in hard copy or soft copy whatsoever, unless I had to go to each and every place to find a place where I could sit and share my opinion and ideas. So in regard to the Africa making promising progress for the for the climate ambition, the story is too long and I don't want to take it over, it takes hours, but I want to say it briefly. How we can do that, achieve that, and bring the world closer and we get together, because nothing will be possible without we us joining the world. Yeah, it is said that if world is burning, we will burn. The way we are sailing, whether we will sail together or we will all drown together. Yeah, we want to achieve and not to be in despair, because we are already time-bound according to the climate, and it is all blended together. We want to make development progress. At the same time, we want to rush for the better climate, bring the world closer and get together. In reality, according to my understanding and study, world is divided North Pole, South Pole, and we are in the equator. I think and understand birds and animals are more sensitive and understanding than we human beings are. Because on the equator, we can live and thrive very well, and there are seasons and weathers where we can migrate together. World is there, is getting smaller, but it's also big if we human beings will have gotten an understanding. And it all starts from us, the mankind, are the destructors of the world, to be honest and sincere. Because if we don't get together, nothing will be achieved. There are families here who don't want to bear more than two children. And there are families in this world who are fighting to marry many wives and to generate population to an extent of explosion. And they say they will just get older by the care of the people of the world. And that should not be the issue. We want to develop the world and march forward. So economists and capitalists should get together, come to understanding what we really want. We cannot emit fossil fuels or fumes out of exhaustion or exhausts and any chemicals. At the same time, I want to bring the world closer. That's all.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other comment on good practices, measures, please?
Testing, 1, 2, 1, 2. Does it work? Does it work? Yes. Okay, fantastic. So my name is Itateng Mukoro from South Africa. I work with TEDx Johannesburg. In the past, we've had a lot of success working with researchers and entrepreneurs, helping to package their ideas and giving them a stage to amplify those ideas, dealing with difficult topics. And the just energy transition is one such topic. We've partnered with organizations, including various embassies, Skoll Foundation, on the pandemics, and so on and so forth. So my question is, have you considered partnering with local TEDx events? TEDx has a ready audience. It has a ready formula that works. There is a proven working formula. You partner with them, you get your message in there. They have a way to simplify and amplify, and the message tends to travel. Have you considered partnering with local TEDx organizations to spread the message?
Thank you. If any of our colleagues wants to answer, and then we can move to the next section. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So local TEDx, I have been involved in TEDx events, but unfortunately not in Nigeria. I was with the TED, I sit on the board of the TED Future Forum, so I appreciate the reach that TED has. Maybe one thing I'll flag is about as much as TEDx has a lot of reach, the language remains a barrier. I think a lot of the people that we are trying to reach to get to change their behavior are not on a laptop watching TEDx videos. And if they are, they're not watching things in English. They're watching it in Hausa, in Yoruba, in Igbo, or whatever language exists. So perhaps there is an opportunity for TEDx locally to begin to sort of collaborate in local language, audio and visual media, to be able to get this message across. But I do agree that it's a great platform and fact-checking and gives a lot of exposure to what works and to the entrepreneurs and the innovators that are really at the front of really trying to push the energy transition forward.
Thanks, Habiba.
I don't think we've tried, but I think my colleague Hope and Sandra over there would probably be up for a discussion. Yeah, so you can definitely chat with us as we walk out. Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much. Please give an applause to our colleagues. Thank you, and thank you, Habiba. And now for our closing reflections, I would like to invite Papa Samba, Director of Hydrocarbons of Senegal's Petroleum and Energy Ministry. Mr. Samba.
Thank you, Luciano, and thank you also to the UN champions for inviting me to deliver these closing remarks after all these those how say very interesting and insightful ideas, experience exchange that was just raised during these couple of minutes. So, as you may know, Senegal just signed just energy transition partnership with some partners, but also with some MDBs. I've said a couple of minutes by my colleagues, it is the last JETP and the first one being African. It's mean, and I agree with that Africa has a great role to play in this energy transition. But in this discussion, it is important also that we put the thing as a right place. What just energy transition means for us as Africans and as developing countries. As an official, as government, I think the priority, our main objective is the economic development of our countries and the economic development of our continent. Today, a lot of the issues that we are discussing about, the clean cooking, the access to energy, the last mile, I think Habiba and his organization is working on that in Nigeria, but it will be the same in other countries. The main reason of that is the lack of economic development of our countries, the lack of infrastructure, the low income of the household and the African continent people. So this is the priority of our government to help to develop, to have more infrastructure in every sector, energy, transportation, telecommunication, etc., but also to help the household to improve the level of income. And to that, it comes to this energy transition. And this energy transition, it is the way to do this economic development in the best to, adapt, compliant way with the climate issues that we are facing. So using the best technology, using the best, experiences in order not to reproduce the errors and the bad strategies that other countries have made. And if we agree on this priority, if we agree on the ranking in terms of subject, I think the rest, how we will apply, how we will develop this energy transition will be easier. Because why it will be easier? Because it needs to consider pragmatism, not to consider any ideologism, any, principle posture that will make difficult the discussion. We spent the last 2 years a lot of discussion about this energy transition and about the right of African countries or other countries to use the fossil fuels. I think the example of Ghana that was presented is a good example. Why are we talking about really using LPG to help household, to get cleaner energy, to save life? So it is just a matter of moral or so. So the principle is today we have clean cooking issue. We need to use any technology definitely to have this problem solved by 2030. And LPG has a positive impact on top of that on the climate issue. The emission, it is a net negative impact on these climate issues that we have. It is perhaps not politically correct, but definitely we need to have this truth discussion to put the fact on the table, and the work that is being done on the ground is very important. The work that is being done in terms of analysis at the international level with the International Energy Agency that is doing a lot of tremendous work on that to put the fact on this energy transition discussion. It needs to be really factual. We need to consider the fact on the ground. We need to also to improve our system of our process of decision. Our process of decision is are lacking a lot about data, and I think the stakeholders can play a great role on that to gather massive data on what is happening on the ground, and this gathering at the national level first, but also at the international level. So really pragmatism based on data, and with that, I think we can go through the different constraints, the different barriers that we are that has already raised in terms of financial costs. So is it normal? Is it moral to have such a perception of risk that is so much decorrelated with what is real on the ground? So Africa is paying a premium that I think it is abnormal to see in this kind of area. And if we compare it, it is one of the main barriers that today people are facing to develop the project, but also to help the population to adapt to the clean energy technology, but also the different projects to come. The second barrier we need also to tackle, it is the scale. In Africa, we are in my to provide more power to the population, but also to decrease the cost. So it is a matter of also, I think the countries have, the government have a great role to play. The regional organization, be it the African Union, but also at other African Union, to see how to consolidate those different need of power in order to decrease the cost of production of the electricity, and also to help to implement industries. Because if you are keep on moving with a small plant, so there will not be enough attractivity to build some manufacturing. So we need to take profit of this free zone, African free zone, in order to implement some regional industries, in order also to secure the equipment and the value chain of this just energy transition. But because it is a great risk for Africa to keep on relying on China or Asian countries or European countries to import the equipment. If you are talking about this energy transition, we are talking about a broader societal, how to say, project that need to consider both the electricity, the industry, how to create job for all those youth that are growing on the ground, and all this will need really to be consolidated and also to be put on the ground. And to finalize, and all these ideas, I think, and all these principles are the background of the JETP of Senegal. And really, we put as a priority this economic development. We put as a priority the right of Senegal, and this is non-negotiable. We do not have to choose between economic development and energy transition. We need to do to target the economic development and using the best solution, using the best technology to see how we can achieve it. And this is through LPG for clean cooking. This is through natural gas to go through gas to power. And this will help to stabilize more the electricity grid, to have more a clean, how say, wind and solar plant on site to be integrated, but also doing some, having some manufacture to, how to say, to produce the equipment that are needed for this energy transition. And this to say also, to finalize my word, just energy transition and the, perhaps we could, the question was raised about this, can we talk about transition when we are talking about people living with biomass, with traditional biomass? We could, it is, how to say, some words, but at the end of the day, it is just energy transition, just energy transformation. The fact is that we need to be resilient, to build some resilient system, both economically, both also technologically. That means that we need to localize the technology, but also to be resilient to the climate, to be resilient also in terms of strategy, because the energy security, it is not a word for developed countries. It is a word also for African countries. Energy security matters a lot, and we can achieve it with all the resources that we have, the renewables, the non-renewables, but also the minerals, the critical minerals. It is another opportunity that we have to build in the frame of this energy transition. And all this, I think, there are a lot of areas of discussion, and the stakeholders part really have a lot of great role to play in this adventure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Papa Samba. Thank you very much for all of you for being here, for our panelists, our contributors. We want to stay engaged with you. This is an ongoing dialogue. We're starting in Africa. We're having other dialogues in other regional weeks, but also we are inviting you to engage with us through that QR code or through that emails, which are really well below 2 degrees. No, we're well below there. So we can stay in touch, continue discussing what the elements of a framework should have, and also get to learn more about what you are doing. We look forward for a successful implementation of Senegal's JETP and also to bring together non-party stakeholders to accelerate that. So that's it from our side. Many thanks for your time. Thank you.
Songi songi bandeko omba makambo omba makambo zala na mayele soki oyoki likambo zala na mayele tango bakotuna yo bandeko omba makambo omba makambo obimi yo na moninga bandeko bosali ndoki ombaka na motema ekoluka matata bandeko omba makambo omba makambo okei mboka ya bato okuti likambo soki osongi bandeko ombaka na motema bandeko omba makambo